Okay, everybody seated? Good morning. Welcome to the NME. My name's Steve Welsh. I'm an educational technologist here at the Center for New Media Teaching and Learning. And it's great to see so many people turn out for our event today. Thank you very much for coming. I'd like to frame today's discussion around a couple of key quotes. Tablet devices and the publishing they enable are leading us to reconsider what constitutes a textbook, and they certainly change the landscape of what it is traditionally meant to write and publish one. From the faculty's perspective, digital publishing is still largely uncharted territory. The average faculty member might say, I don't have the spare time to learn how to develop a dazzling, immersive digital learning environment from scratch. To that end, developing effective interactions for these resources is becoming a new competency. And only through experimentation will best practices emerge. In other words, we have to start somewhere. One thing is clear, a new regime of technology is already in the classrooms and the study halls. A dramatic shift has taken place since the introduction of smartphones, e-readers, and tablet computers in the last 7 years or so. I'm unveiling here some brand new data from a student technology survey taken recently at the medical school. And as you can see, the rate of penetration for these kinds of devices is already quite high. Students are already using them for coursework and studying. And apparently our friends at Microsoft have their work cut out for them in the tablet market. Sorry, guys. As we'll hear from a couple of our panelists today, we're working with the tools we have right now. And ideally, what we create will accommodate a bring-your-own-device model so that we're not locking students into a single platform in the digital textbook market. We'll see a number of our panelists are developing for iPads with iBooks Author and iTunes U courses, but it's likely that where iPad applications have left, or had led, other platforms can be expected to follow, creating a more competitive and diverse market. So, given that your students are already using these new technologies, and the technical bar of entry is relatively low for diving in and creating your own new digital texts, it's a great time to throw out the textbook and start from scratch, to evolve your pedagogy, if you will. But how exactly do we tackle this new opportunity? Shel Wagner recently published a great article in EDUCAUSE Review, which outlines some basic tenets for embracing academic digital publishing, or e-content, in the academy. I've teased out some of these do's and don'ts and modified them a bit. Our panelists will raise several of these themes in their talk, but from my perspective, this last pair, the carpe diem of the bunch, is really the most salient. So with that, I'll introduce our panelists and hand it over to the experts. Vincent Racaniello he's done laboratory research on viruses for over 30 years, and following on his belief that scientists must communicate their work to the public, he has co-authored a virology textbook, taught virology, distributed videocasts of his lectures online, written a blog about viruses, and produced podcasts on viruses, parasites, and bacteria. I see Professor Racaniello as an exemplar of the self-publisher. He's largely independent and publishes broadly. Dr. Paulette Bernd was recruited to Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons in 2008 to create a gross anatomy course for the new medical curriculum that emphasizes teamwork, clinical relevance, and concepts rather than minutiae. The nature of that course led to the creation of a custom-tailored multimedia dissection manual that is the focus of her talk. Grant Ackerman is a professor of management at Columbia Business School. As faculty director for the Columbia Essentials of Management program, he was part of the team that first introduced the iPad into the business school's executive education programs. Professor Ackerman will discuss a department-wide project to implement iPads in the executive education program for use as an extended learning resource. Mark Newton, on the end of the panel there, he's the production manager for the Center for Digital Research and Scholarship at Columbia University Libraries and Information Services. And at Cedars, his work includes providing scholarly publishing, service support, as well as developing innovative solutions to the digital scholarship needs of the Columbia community. He'll be speaking about several of CEDAR's partnerships with Columbia faculty to publish academic work online. And lastly, here's my contact info, which will also be available at on the NME site. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Professor Racaniello, and the podium is yours. Just launch you.
Thank you very much. Smile, everybody. So this is what I do whenever I give a talk, and I put it on Facebook because this is how I connect. And what I want to tell you today is how I do that. So sometime in the first 3 decades of the 20th century, a virus went from a chimpanzee to a human. We've got 1921 on here just to give it a nice date. And that virus and that individual went on to infect 60 million people by today. How cool is that? This is virology, and I'm a virologist. And this is what I like to tell people, what we do. I think it's really important to communicate our work because we use public money to do our research, but maybe more importantly because, as you can see here, this of course is the AIDS epidemic. This impacts everyone. Viruses impact everyone, and most people do not understand them. In fact, I would venture to guess that we'd be lucky if half of you even got the flu vaccine this year. You probably think it doesn't work or whatever, but it's our job to educate. So my goal is scientists to educate the public about science. So I'm going to tell you how I do that. We do teach, and I'm going to tell you about using course materials, but I do other things because it's a network that we do. So I'm going to talk to you about blogging, podcasting, the use of social media, Twitter, Facebook, Google+, to engage an audience, YouTube, because this is where the kids are, and me too, and online coursework, all together. So this whole journey that I'm on began with writing a textbook over 10 years ago. I would say this is the standard textbook of virology now. It's published by ASM Press. It's 2 volumes. It's in its 3rd edition. We're just starting to work on the 4th edition, which will be a real digital text. I don't consider a PDF a digital text. I mean a real living text, interactive and so forth. The publisher, ASM, has been very reluctant to do this. They say the world isn't ready, but we've been ready years ago. Because I wrote a book, I knew a lot about viruses. So a virologist becomes very specialized, but when you write a textbook, you learn about many different viruses. So about 2004, I decided to start writing a blog. So about then, blogging platforms became easy to use. This is the first post I ever wrote June 9th, 2004, Are Viruses Living? It's one of the top hits still to this day. That people are really fascinated by this question. But this allowed me to engage this wider audience, which really surprised me. Today, this site gets about 2,000 to 3,000 hits a day. And all sorts of people want to go and find out about viruses. So this was our first step. I then took it another step further. In 2008, I started podcasting. We now do 3. The flagship is This Week in Virology, which is the one that's on my cell phone, okay? So wherever I go, people look at this. What is that? Well, let me tell you about it, and I get 5 or 6 more people. Twiv.tv, you should check it out. We do this weekly. It's me and a couple of virologists on Skype having a conversation about viruses, and the public loves these. This podcast alone has had over 2 million downloads in 4 years. And about 30% of them are scientists, the rest are not. So we started 2 others, one on bacteria and one on parasites. And we get all sorts of emails on a daily basis, which we make part of each show. We answer them. It's really a lot of fun. I love it. About 4 years ago, I started teaching a virology course here at Morningside. There hadn't been a virology course here since the 80s. This is absurd, right? Top class university, no virology course. So I took it on myself to do. I don't have to do this. At a medical school, we don't have to do any teaching, really. Because, except gross anatomy and that sort of thing, because it's not rewarded. A basic scientist like myself is not rewarded for teaching, which is just terrible, but that's the fact of life. When it's time for tenure, what you've done teaching for a basic scientist like me means nothing. So anyway, I started teaching this course. The first year it had 30 students. This year we have 200 students in this course. This is the room we're in. It's packed. It's just great. I love it. They love this, and they take it because they hear that virology is a cool course, but they hear that that's the professor who does the podcasts and the blogs. This is really important to engage your students. Now, I started recording my lectures from the start because I thought, I don't want to just teach 30 students. I want to teach the world. So I put them on iTunes U. First, I put them on my own website. So I have this website, which is part of my blog, and I put all the reading material, all the podcasts for different formats, iPhone, iPad, etc., Mac, PC. And then I put it on iTunes U. I got in touch with CCNMTL, which I'd never heard of. And I don't know how they got in touch with me, but they helped me put it on iTunes U. So this is an early incarnation, and it was very popular. It was often on the front page. And then with the iPad and the iPhone app, then it really hit the big time. Apple featured the course last spring. You can see here, this is the iPad app. For 1 week, they would cycle through 5 different courses. And man, did that give us a bump in registration. This is just phenomenal. We have 75,000 people who have clicked subscribe and put it on their iPhone or iPad, just for last year's course, and we've just started a new one now. So I put here the video cast that I capture as I lecture. I don't sit at my desk and make a lecture. I'm much better in front of an audience. It's different, right? You could do it in 10-minute gaps in front of your desk, but it's not going to be the same. And I get student questions in it as well. And so that is what I put up there. And I try and make a good quality product. As you'll see here, this is the iPhone app. We're up on the top charts, number 60 on the left there. On the right is the page, and it has 192 reviews. You can see they're all pretty good, but the ones that are 4 stars and below, they complain about the audio quality. We had some production problems. So you have to have good quality material because it turns people off. You have to put time into learning how to do it. It's one thing that I've learned, and we try and do it and improve each year. So these 75,000 people, they send me questions by email. This year we're going to move to Coursera and incorporate questions and so forth as part of the learning. But I am achieving my goal, which is to teach. I tell people I want to be Earth's virology professor, right? People laugh at me, but it's a brand thing, right? And in fact, some of my colleagues in different countries are translating our lectures into different languages, which is great. I had a Russian student last year, and she volunteered to translate all of them into Russian. How great is that? And we've already got Spanish almost done. So I think this is the way to give this information out. Now, I also I think last year, we started putting the videos up on YouTube. I have 3 young kids, and they spend all their time on YouTube. This is where they learn about what's going on in the world. I come home, and my son tells me, "Did you hear this happened?" I said, "Where did you hear that? On the news?" He said, "No, I saw it on YouTube." So I started putting the videos here. And I really didn't pay much attention to this, but as I put the course videos on, I get more and more subscribers, just virally, because I don't advertise this. I think if we made a big effort here, we could do even better, because this is the way kids like to learn. Now, these are long. These are an hour and 10 minutes, and probably would be better broken up. But as an initial step, I think it's good. So we have different channels here. I have the 2012 course channel, this year 2013, and then our podcasts sometimes come out as videos, so we put them here. I think there's a lot we can do with this, a lot more, to engage people this way. So basically, we use all these things: blogging, podcasting, online courses. I advertise all of this on Twitter, Google+. Whenever I do something, I post that. I have many, many followers on Twitter that I've built up over the years. Google+ is approaching that. This is a learning network that we've built up. You can certainly put your course online. You can certainly make a digital textbook, and they would work independently. But if you build a network of people who like you and trust you, that's even better. So that's why I say this is our learning network, and this is scientists teaching science. I want to leave you with 2 thoughts. Scientists are the people to teach the public science. You don't want the public to get their science from lawyers, from journalists. Some journalists are very good, but every week I show my class another crazy headline that makes no sense about something scientific. So they get it wrong all the time, especially because the headline writers don't write the articles. You want to learn science from scientists because they're doing it all the time. Now, not every scientist can teach, but those who can need to do this. The second point is you may take away the classroom by giving out these sorts of lectures, but you can't take away the faculty, especially science faculty. We need a lab to work in. That's what makes us authoritative, by doing research. We can't do it at home. I mean, we can record a video at home, but we need a lab, and no lab exists on its own. You can't have just one lab somewhere. You need to have a bunch of labs together with colleagues who interact, have lunch, and talk about the latest problem. So we're always going to have a university for science anyway, as far as I can see it. And that's how you make great scientists and great science courses. So scientists teaching science, I'll leave you with that. And hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you. Just double check something really quick here. We are mirrored. Okay. And Dr. Bernd. Oh, man. Give me 1 second, sorry. Go ahead and take it from there.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Steve and Michelle Hall for inviting me to speak today and present the dissection manual that I created in collaboration with students. It's been used for the past 2 years in the medical and dental school gross anatomy course and has received rave reviews, if I say so myself. And I want to start by actually confessing that this project was not developed with the intention of using new media, but it has evolved to do so, and I'll be describing that. So why did we even need a new dissection manual? We had been using one of the most popular commercial dissectors, Grants, but students were frustrated as they tried to do their dissections because the instructions were lengthy and contained what they thought was extraneous information. And also there were no photographs, just line drawings of what the dissections should look like. So let me just show you what the dissector looked like. On the left, you see a typical page from Grant's dissector, and these are instructions for exposing the spinal cord. And you can see the accompanying line drawings on that page. Plus, they also give references to various atlases for seeing additional images. And on the right, you see a page from Netter's atlas. And what you notice is that the atlas images are often much more detailed than the dissection images, but they only show the students what the final product is going to look like, not the steps along the way, which is a major issue. And I was also frustrated with the dissection manual because I was designing a course for our new medical school curriculum, as Steve mentioned, and that necessitated cutting hours and making choices as to what I should and shouldn't include. And I also often disagreed, actually, with the sequence that Grants used to do the dissections. So what that meant was that I had to include instructions like this for each laboratory. First of all, just notice that in this lab where they're doing the spinal cord and the back of the shoulder, they had to jump from page 18 then to page 22. And then I would also tell them for the spinal cord, they weren't doing the entire vertebral column, they were only doing a small part. And in the shoulder dissection, I wanted them to do steps 19 through 21 before step 16. So all of this made for a very cumbersome instructions that the students were frustrated with and they found awkward to use. So the idea of creating my own dissector was always in the back of my mind, but it became a reality when I was approached by a group of students anxious and willing to work with me. The 3 male students are Columbia PNS students, and Lily is a SUNY Downstate student. And they worked all summer very hard on this project. They performed a complete dissection of the human body and took pictures, constantly took pictures as they worked. And together we created this manual using a Word publishing layout, and we had it printed, hard copy, on heavy-duty paper so it would survive the gross anatomy lab. And that's how we used it back in 2011, 2 years ago, or 2 courses ago. And this is the cover of the first edition. And this next slide shows you on the right a typical page then from the dissection manual for the same dissection that I showed you earlier from Grant's dissector. This is again where they're exposing the spinal cord. And you can, well, you probably can't see, but the instructions are clear and concise. The photographs show the sequential steps in the dissection and not just the final product that the atlases show. And as a result, students have been much less frustrated in lab. They produce better dissections. And we were also pleased to see that their grades actually improved on our practical exams. And this graph shows you their performance for the past 3 years. We have 3 exams in the course, blocks 1, 2, and 3, and the contents are indicated there. The blue bars show the average grades for students in 2010 who used Grant's dissector. And the red and green bars are the average grades for students in 2011 and this past course in 2012. And you can see that for block 1, the performance increased dramatically with the new dissection manual. But interestingly, the effect was less pronounced on block 2 and eliminated or gone by the 3rd block. And my interpretation of this is that the dissector is most crucial for students who are just learning how to study and master anatomy. And by the end of the course, this becomes less of an issue for the students. Now, 1 month after the course, the 2011 course ended, Apple released iBook Author. That was in January of 2012. And I immediately saw that this would be an ideal way to publish the dissection manual. The primary advantage being, of course, picture quality. That beautiful retina display would be maybe not pictures you would want to see, but there's certainly much better quality than on the hard copy, no question about it. Plus, there are also many other advantages, and what I'm going to do is demonstrate the iPad to you now. So what you're looking at then is, and by the way, I did this all myself. It's something that anyone can do. It's not, doesn't require a degree in computers or computer programming. It's something that really anyone can do. It's a wonderful app, wonderful program. So what we're looking at now is the table of contents view, and we're going to be just looking at Lab 5 to demonstrate some of these features of iBook Author. And in the table of contents view, you can look and easily see the thumbnails of the various pages in that chapter. And I'm going to go to this page to demonstrate some of the features. And what you're seeing on the right, or I don't know if you can see, but on the right are steps in the dissection of the back of the shoulder. And the great thing about the iPad is not just that the images look wonderful, it's that you can tap on any image and enlarge it. And they just look gorgeous. I mean, to me, they look gorgeous, as I said. But this is the back of the shoulder. I hope I'm not grossing anyone out, but that's the back of the shoulder. They're very clear instructions that show the students where to cut the muscle, and then the next picture shows them what it's going to look like once they have reflected the muscle. So, so that's been extremely helpful to the students. The other thing is that you notice we have line drawings, simple line drawings, accompanying most pages. And this is to help the students with orientation. And again, These can be blown up. And we often use images from Gray's Anatomy, the original edition that's free use. But last summer we were fortunate to have a post-bac student who wants to go to medical school work with us, and he created some really beautiful, simple drawings to help the students orient themselves and understand what they were seeing in the lab. Now, now I want to show you next the glossary feature, which we're including for all bold-faced terms. So if we want to learn more about the suprascapular artery, we just double-click on it, and you see the description of its source and its course that it takes. And if the student wants even more information, they go to the glossary index and they can see images as well. So we're putting this in for all the muscles and arteries and nerves so that the students can, in a sense, have this relatively easy textbook tool to use along with the dissection manual, but that extraneous information doesn't clutter up the manual, which I think is important. The other thing you can do with the iBook Author is any word that you don't know the meaning of, for instance, you can ask for a definition, and it will show you the definition. And if you want to learn more about it, you can also search the web or search Wikipedia very easily right through iBook Author. And then students retain the ability also to, hold on, I knew I wouldn't do this well here. All right, students retain the ability to highlight, for instance, in whatever color they choose, and then they can write themselves a note, be careful. And that way their note is there and they can look at it to remind themselves later. So that's kind of nice. So, and then the last thing that I want to show you, which I think is tremendous, is that we have the ability to put quizzes in with the at the end of each chapter for the students to review. Some of these are just simple multiple choice questions. The student can check their answer and see if they're correct. We can also include an image in the multiple choice, so we can ask students to do that. Let me just put a wrong answer so you can see if the answer is incorrect. The iBook Author asks them if they want to try again, so they try again and then they get it right. And then the really great thing, I think, is that we can create matching type questions like this where we indicate all these different muscles with the dots, and then students simply drag up what they think that muscle is with these labels below. And again, they can verify their answers that way. So let's get back to the,
Okay.
all right, I'm just,
Can you show us Rembrandt's anatomy lesson? Or is that irrelevant?
not right now, not right now. I only have 10 minutes. So we did use this iPad version of the dissection manual during this past semester's course, and it was very successful. And we were fortunate that Dr. and Mrs. Roy Vagelos, graduates of PNS and Barnard respectively, donated iPads to the anatomy lab. So we had one iPad for each of the 30 tables in the laboratory. So we are thinking to the future and are planning where to go next. And we've decided, or I've decided, to eventually publish and distribute the dissection manual through a Department of Surgery website called Coach. And this is essentially a wiki with oversight. And the primary advantage of this is, of course, that it will be able to run on any platform, which I think has great appeal to me and the students, including the phones, the smartphones. So this is where we're going next. And there's some other additional advantages, one of which is that we could, for instance, actually grade those quizzes and incorporate that into at least a small percentage of their final grade. And then I just want to finish by thanking the following departments and people. Pathology has generously donated money to support this project, as has the Alumni Association and Office of Diversity. And I particularly want to thank the students who worked last summer. This is a continuing project. Every summer I see more, this continuing on for many, many years. We're moving into videos next. So it's an ongoing student-faculty collaboration, and everyone is very pleased with it, including the students. Okay, thank you.
Our next speaker is Grant Ackerman.
Thank you very much. Steve, appreciate the opportunity to present and thank the organizers for the conference to make this happen. Consistent with the introduction that Steve was kind enough to give me when he said that I was part of the team that introduced iPad into executive education programs, I want to stay with that theme and emphasize what can amount to at times the social psychology of the introduction of technology, in this case an executive education program, and particularly with a view at the institutional level. So what we encountered when we made this kind of commitment and how we had to get a lot of people involved and a lot of people on board to make it successful. It actually began when our Associate Dean for Executive Education, in concert with the Dean of the Business School, our Associate Dean is Michael Malafakis, the Dean of the Business School is Glenn Hubbard. They resolved that we could move forward in an experiment to introduce iPad into executive education. I had signaled previously as a faculty director for the Columbia Essentials of Management program that I would like to try. When I had my first conversation with Associate Dean Malafakis, I indicated to him that I was excited, I wanted to experiment with it. He admired that, he complimented me and said that was great because I was the only one who was willing to do it. And so we began this journey of an experimentation with kind of a first step that suggested there was a lot of caution amongst our faculty about what would happen when you introduce this kind of device into an executive education program. Now I'm going to talk more about the unique aspects of executive education and what we had to allow for when we were introducing this particular device. And again, you'll note that my efforts will be to not only talk about an end product, but also the process. So it began with the question that I actually adapted from an old Steve Martin routine, for those of you who may remember Steve Martin. His routine was, how do you get $1 million and don't pay taxes on it? Well, first, you get $1 million, and then you don't pay taxes on it. That was kind of where we were. How do you introduce an iPad into an executive education program? Well, first, you get an iPad, and then you introduce it into an executive education program. Well, the reality is there was so much more to the story that we recognized that we were going to have a team effort, and we were going to have to prepare in a way that at times bordered on over-preparation. And so this is what I call the ensemble cast. These are all the individuals, and there are likely a couple that are missing. Individuals who in some way touched not only the introduction of the iPad into our program, but also another product that I'll talk about later, and that is the use of an iBook as a follow-on learning tool for this same program. So we began with a brainstorming session that hopefully identified what the fears were, what the apprehensions were, and there were several of them, and we consistently tried to be strategic. We were going to do just enough that we could be successful, and all along the way made sure we had plot points where if we resolved we had to pull back and not do it for that particular program, that was okay. In some respects, the deans gave us permission to fail, that we were able to move forward, but at any point in time hit that gate that would suggest that we had better wait until the next iteration of the program. We also had some thought blocks where, for example, note the language so far is how do you introduce an iPad into the program. Many immediately said, why an iPad? Oftentimes just born of a bias. And we resolved that, one, we were going to be device agnostic, that we had to choose one particular device because our capacity to distribute the device to our participants in the exec ed program made sure that it was complementary to what we were designing. But in being agnostic, in the course of time, if we found that it would be better to use a different device, we did not have a problem with that, but you have to start somewhere. So we began with the iPad and experimented with all of that. The other reflection early on, even as the associate dean had asked me to lead the effort, it was going to be an ensemble effort. I realized that as a faculty member, this project would be driven more by staff than it would be by faculty. That because of time commitments, because of expertise, and so I recommended to our associate dean that it be chaired, this particular initiative be chaired by a staff member. And so in the person of Amy Diner, our Director of Program Management, she chaired this task force that was responsible for introducing the iPad into the Columbia Essentials of Management Executive Education Program, orchestrating our efforts right along the way. That continues to be the case. I'm going to talk a little bit later about staff-driven developments as we create new products. One of the great challenges for us was introducing a device into a program that could become a shiny object. The unique aspect of executive education programs is that we don't, as faculty, have some of the tools to ensure students' attention. So, for example, it's not graded. There's not tests. These are executives from around the world who are coming to learn, but they pretty much set the standard of their own learning. And we have in the past suffered at times from executives who ended up getting distracted by their emails on their devices that they had brought with them. And our challenge was we were literally going to hand them a device and tell them to look at it, that they could easily download a whole host of work-related items, and would that become the shiny object that would distract them? That was one of the great challenges that we tried to normalize at the very outset. These executives, when we first start on a Sunday afternoon in orientation, not only receive their iPad, which they were excited about, but we very intentionally had about an hour conversation with them about what this meant. First and foremost, that we were all in a learning environment. We tried to normalize uncertainty because not only were they apprehensive about using the device, their expertise using this kind of device varied from expert to not at all, but we had to normalize the fact that what we were doing was also getting into unknown territory. So in the midst of uncertainty, we created a learning environment where it was okay not to know. It was okay to stop, ask questions, and work together, and that included the faculty in the front of the room as well as the staff who were helping to orchestrate all of this, both from a technology perspective as well as the educational content perspective. So we created a learning environment where it was okay for us to experiment. That worked for the participants. There's a saying in China that success has many parents, failure is an orphan. Well, I'm here to tell you that this particular project has many parents because we were successful in reaching those executives and help them not only engage with the device, but also work with us to create that kind of learning environment. Those were the participants. Then we came to the faculty. And from the outset, as I explained, the faculty were hesitant to be in competition with the shiny device. It had happened previously. We have sessions where faculty will actually stop and focus on a participant that may be distracted. And that norm had to evolve for the faculty as well as the participants. That we were equipping them with this tool. We had to learn to live with it in the classroom. And the reality was, at any point in time, a faculty member could be upstaged by the tool. They had Wi-Fi access. They could certainly begin to browse and Google and get beyond what was being presented at the front of the room. Our resolve was, in this new era and the new normal, that we had to be better than what was available on the device. We had to capture their attention and be interesting enough that they actually wanted to focus on us rather than the distractions that we were putting in front of them. So that was the new normal. Some faculty still had apprehensions about it, but all of them came along eventually, because the reality was, in this 2-week, it's a 2-week immersion program that we do at a conference center, the iPads were now a part of the new normal. And so faculty had to begin to roll with it at different levels. One of the keys was that we had to normalize that there would be mistakes, including the Wi-Fi access going out or the devices failing. in the middle of a session, at which point the faculty member had to be comfortable just saying we have a technical difficulty and we're going to continue, which is so an opposite at times in exec ed where we like that seamless presentation. Ultimately, when we got to that moment of making it happen, I can tell you that it was fraught with difficulties. Friday evening before the Sunday start of the program, Amy Diner called me and said that they were having technical difficulties, and we were perched ready to cancel the use of the iPad just 2 days before the program was about to start. Fortunately, we were able to correct those difficulties and in the process introduce the program. Let me just highlight the product that was continuing to be developed even after we got into the SEM program and had success using it in the classroom. This is a new digital learning product that I'm going to show you an example of. We used iBook. You'll note in the presentation that it is labeled as both Grant Ackerman and Veronica Thomas. Veronica Thomas is a staff member who couldn't be with us today, who was actually instrumental in driving this particular product. This would be a chapter from the product that continues with the conversation that occurred in the program. The technique, similar to what Pauline described, you can have questions, you can have opportunities for testing on those questions, and also recommended readings and beyond. I also want to show just one more feature. We were able to include videos.
Let me go ahead and recap some of the things we talked about in leadership communication session. I'm going to just recap some elements of speech anxiety, nonverbal communication, vocal communication, and structuring.
That's about as loud as it'll get.
Recognize that it's just part of
But
the
these were
process.
videos that were produced either on site in our media studio at Uris Hall, or actually some of them were produced in a home studio that faculty had set up. That's the essence of it. The final thought in all of this is that the challenge that we face is one of figuring out new ways of working together. The reality is all of us are still learning, and the more that we can cooperate between faculty and staff to take the content and turn it into digital products in order to not only be more effective in the classroom, but also in the follow-on learning, the more effective we'll be as an institution that promotes this kind of learning. So that's it. Thank you.
And just give us one moment to change over for Mark Newton.
First, thanks very much to Steve and to Courtney and to all of the event planners for the NME 2013. This is my pleasure to be here with you today. My name is Mark Newton. I'm with the Center for Digital Research and Scholarship, which is a division of the Columbia University Libraries Information Services. And I'm here to talk a little bit about what we think of as campus-based publishing, a suite of services actually that we provide out of the center. So by way of outline then, I'll try to put the work that we do in our center into context with the larger movement in library-based publishing services. Frequently these campus-based publishing options are coming from the libraries. And then to quickly move you through a couple of examples that I think demonstrate the range of the kinds of projects that we're seeing at Cedars, and then leave you with a couple of takeaways. Just very quickly, in the late 2000s, there were a number of data-backed reports showing that the momentum for library-based and campus-based publishing services was on the rise. This was followed by a funded project out of the Institute of Museum and Library Services in 2011, report published in 2012. I was a part of this project, which showed that among the institutions surveyed of all major college and university libraries, over half were actively supporting or developing library-based publishing services. If you look at just the Association of Research Libraries, that's the large university libraries, that jumped to 79%. And so just following on from that report then, I just wanted to highlight that there's a new coalition of these library publishing programs that has just kicked off its project. They convened their first meeting yesterday. It's a 2-year project that's being backed by the nonprofit Educopia Institute. So for Cedars, I should mention, and Cedars is one of the foundational members of that coalition. There's a good reason for this. Since 2007, Cedars' mission has been creating, adapting, implementing, supporting, sustaining digital tools and publishing platforms for our campus partners. This includes Columbia faculty and the Columbia student body with innovative publishing projects with whom we partner. So we've developed a suite of publishing services, which I will step you through, but it's not just, and this would include things like scholarly journals and conference proceedings, but it steps well into the range of the kinds of digital projects that I think we've seen on display here today, or at least that's the interest of the center in moving to partner with faculty and students on innovative digital projects with a web focus. We also have the Academic Commons Digital Repository, which many here who are from Columbia will be familiar with. This is our online open access digital repository of Columbia scholarship and a preservation platform with which our publishing program partners quite extensively. We're also involved in the areas of research data management, data publication, as well as our scholarly communication program, which oversees the campus open access fund, which many of you may be familiar with as well. So open access publishing, scholarly communication, research data management, these sort of new frontiers in library services is really what our center is all about. I wanted to show this chart. This is our journal publishing tier. Because our journal publishing services is probably among the most mature of the service offerings through the center, I thought this was instructive to show that we have a range of options for our partners who come to us with journal publishing support opportunities, ranging all the way from the left to this very sort of quick to implement, highly templated, and sort of free to set up arrangements to more bespoke projects all the way to the left, and the range of services that CEDARS can provide all the way down, which include things like graphic design, other sorts of web application development. Anything that our partners might be interested in, we'll entertain, and it usually fits somewhere on this grid, specifically when we're talking about journal publishing. Perhaps our most well-known and supported journal is Tremor and Other Hyperkinetic Movements. This is a journal that's published with our partner out of Mailman, Elan Lewis, a professor of epidemiology, neurological disorders. This was launched last year. We just passed a milestone, over 40 articles published to the journal, which then qualified us for evaluation in PubMed Central's index. This is of particular interest to our faculty partner because this means if we were to pass the scientific quality evaluation and the technical needs of the PubMed Central evaluation, we would then be eligible for PubMed Central indexing and appear in PubMed, which was, of course, an extremely high priority for him. But this is an interesting journal for us on a number of different levels because it is built on open source software, open journal systems, for those who are familiar with it. In fact, a lot of what we do in the center is enabled by the extensive use of open source software that we can continually modify, as we have done for Tremor. Our partner takes advantage of, it's an open access journal, and so there are article processing charges that the authors pay as a part of the publication process. These monies go into the typesetting, copy editing, XML conversion for all the content that gets published in the journal by a third party. And so part of the work that CEDARS does is building the connections between our faculty partner and the journal management and this offsite service that's provided. And we build those hooks into the system because we're working with open source software. Just to give you a flavor of I know it's logo overload, but this is the idea here is to give you an idea of the types of partners that we took on and that we worked with over the past year. There's a number of journals here for which we're providing various levels of support. And I just wanted to say, they're not all coming to us with projects where they want to be able to review all of the manuscripts within the journal system and publishing everything online, open access. We have a variety of relationships, new journals, existing journals looking for new digital presences, existing journals with us that have new editorial staffs that want to bring a new face and some new elements into their existing journal, as well as sites which are companion sites to existing print journals that are published with other entities, all represented on this map here. 20 in total, 11 of these relaunched in the last year, and as I suggested, a number of our partners come to us because of our emphasis on support for open access content. We're not all journals. Monograph Publishing, we have also worked with a faculty Columbia affiliate, Nenny Panurgia, who published a book with the Fordham University Press, but who had many materials that were essential for the critical interpretation of that book, which did not fit into the print format. So it was a three-way collaboration between the author, the university press, and Cedars to bring that book online with the press in its print format freely available online, with Cedars electronically mapped to all of these multimedia and other sorts of analytic and supplemental materials in context with the text. I also wanted to bring attention to a couple of other projects which sort of highlight the range of things that we're doing. These are ones that are underway, but the majority of the work is still on the horizon for us, with both of these with deep faculty partner involvement. Digital Dante on the left, Professor Berolini out of the Department of Italian, the sponsor of the Digital Dante site, which many here actually may be familiar with because it's an existing site with a rich history at Columbia. But because of support arrangements for the site, it was transferred over to the Center for Digital Research and Scholarship for sort of a new take on what might be done with this very well-known, highly linked resource. It's a critical piece of Professor Berolini's classroom teaching, and what we're doing with her is bringing in technologists, librarians, others to consult around the table to re-envision how to build on the existing work in Digital Dante for the next generation. Marenzio project on the left-hand side here. Oh, Digital Dante, I really didn't explain that well enough. It's a site of Dante's works, translations, critical interpretations, and other related material to the work of the Divine Comedy and the rest of Dante's writings. On the left-hand side here, the Marenzio project is an NEH-funded project, spearheaded by Professor Gerbino out of the Department of Music. Our Cedars' involvement in this project at the outset has been to provide collaboration support through our Alfresco platform that we also that we support. It's an online document sharing and description tool for Professor Gerbino to be able to collaborate with his project members off campus. So there's project members from Stony Brook and overseas who need to be able to collaborate online. Cedars provides support for that. But the conversation has progressed to the point that we're talking about publishing some of the outputs of the Marenzio project. It's a project to digitize the 16th century madrigals of Luca Marenzio, to create new critical editions and new critical interpretations of these digitized works. In the first place, we're talking about bringing these onto an online platform to publish in the first place in PDF format. But as was saliently pointed out by our first speaker, PDF publication is not exactly taking advantage of the full affordances of the digital environment. And we're increasingly working toward a project to bring these online interpretations into an interactive research environment along with the critical apparatus in the original digitized texts. I wanted to wind up with just a couple of a couple of notes about challenges that we face in the center and possibly opportunities for bridging some of those challenges with those who may be in the audience or those whom you know. As you might imagine, our staff is not infinitely scalable. We're a modest group of about 15, and we're persistently looking for ways to turn our projects from first-of-a-kind services to services that can be templated in ways that are useful to our faculty partners. We're also looking for projects that increase competencies in critical areas for us. This includes things like incorporation of the semantic web, mobile application developments, and partnerships with other entities. I mentioned the Dangerous Citizens Project was a partnership with the university press, scholarly societies. Other groups were very interested in bridging with. So I invite any who might be in the audience today who saw something in the sorts of projects that we're doing at Cedars, an opportunity for digital support institutionally, please talk to me because I'm very interested in seeing if you might fit into the kinds of things that we're doing at Cedars. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. We're going to try to wrap this up relatively quick. I would love to have some Q&A, though. Does anybody have any questions for the panel?
My question is for the people at P&S, since you don't get reimbursed for doing this kind of work and grants aren't given for this kind of work, what, if any, financial support did you get to help you do this?
Great. Great question. I'm sure that's a complicated one. And next.
Yeah, I'm curious about what you see as some of the most effective and innovative ways to build interaction into the learning process. Obviously, we saw some of the questions and testing, but there's a lot more you can do technologically for two reasons. One, to enhance learning, as well as to use in the classroom. We commonly talk about like what could happen outside the classroom and then the need for a teacher inside the classroom. But how do you bring that interaction inside the classroom while learning?
Great. And we'll take one more question, and then we'll give the panel a few minutes and try to wrap this up soon.
I'm Liz Gordon. I'm at the business school, but I'd like to know, I think it's relevant to everyone, how do you get faculty to, so you mentioned that you have to talk to them a lot about changing their style, but you just sort of skimmed over how that actually happened. And for you and for, Mr. Virology, how do we get faculty to engage with new technologies they're not used to? And you seem like, for example, you have a lot of interest in it, you do blogging, you do all this stuff. I could see working with my faculty that we would have to surround them with staff people that did all that. And I'm curious your thoughts.
Okay, so there's definitely a direct question for Paulette in there, but if the panel wants to toss around some of the other questions as well, we'll do about 5 minutes, okay?
Okay. With respect to the publishing, there are indeed publishers of digital types to sectors. There was one that I actually looked at that one of the atlases does, and it was very flexible. I love the images in that atlas, but it did not allow me to incorporate my own images. They were all drawings again. And so I quickly discarded that idea. Obviously, reinventing the wheel is not something we want to do, but I definitely looked into what was commercially out there. I was approached by McGraw-Hill, and actually they offered me a deal, but not that I think I'm getting rich from any of this, but they certainly don't give you a very good deal. Plus, they insist on a hard copy, and I just didn't think that was the way to go. And they certainly weren't going to give me any technical assistance in terms of carrying it out. So really, it was not. So I discarded that idea right away. I mean, the choices, I think, are either the Apple Store, through iTunes or through Coach is, I think, the best way to go. The other question about active learning, that's a big component of our course. The dissection group is 4 students. They do dissection work once a week. The other day of the week, they work in their small groups solving clinical cases, looking at MRIs and CAT scans, and figuring things out as a small group. So we really do encourage that activity. Because I do think students remember it better when they figure it out themselves. And I'm planning to also bring that into a digital format, but there's just only so much one person can do at one time.
We have time for just about one more remark, if anybody wanted to address.
I can do 2 real quickly, starting with the faculty. It was interesting that some of the faculty members who were the most hesitant originally became the greatest cheerleaders for what we were doing eventually. And that resulted because we just experimented. We tried to create that safe space. And once they saw that it was doable, they were willing then to take the next iteration. In fact, in a follow-on program, not the Essentials of Management, one of our other programs, faculty members took it to the next level. Among them were some that were skeptical initially. So I think it is expanding the comfort zone and helping everybody move forward gently. The second question is about the iteration, or the interaction. One of the challenges that we were apprehensive about was the infrastructure that would support what we wanted to do. So the first time out, we didn't know whether we would have Wi-Fi that would support what we were trying to do until 2 weeks before the program. They were installing new Wi-Fi at the conference center. We were cautiously optimistic. So we could not plan on having interaction using the device in the room using the device, because that would have been driven by Wi-Fi. The next time out, that was solved. We found that we had actually decent Wi-Fi, and so there's another example where we can begin to expand what we do based upon a confidence in the infrastructure.
Okay, and I would love to continue this conversation for a few days, actually, but unfortunately, we have some time constraints. We're going to move on to our next session. I can't thank you guys enough for participating today. Thank you so much.